So we're hearing more news on this potential Manchester United takeover with the UAE, and we've got some updates coming in from some tier one, very reliable sources on why the Glazers are really having talks with potential investors. And what is the aim? A 5 billion plus full sale of Man United is what the Glazers are believed to want, and they can force out Ratcliffe. We will talk about the latest on that. Manchester United Academy stars could get a big chance soon. I said this isn't the season for Academy stars to get minutes because we're not in the Europa League. We've been knocked out the cup competition so early. If Maynard and Xerxes can't get minutes, how can we expect the youth to get minutes? But AFCON is a big chance for a couple of youth players that have been named to get minutes in the place of Amad and Mbeumo, because that's two big players gone. And when you look at the Sunderland game, they were our biggest strength. In terms of other news, we're going to talk about Casemiro, the latest on his potential exit. Is he going to sign a new deal? Same with Maguire, and also updates about Manchester United wanting Anton Semenyo. So, hello, and welcome back to Alice Talks Football, and welcome back to your 10-minute Manchester United news, transfer news, update, roundup show, where I'm going to discuss all the latest Manchester United news in 10 minutes for you guys. If you're new to the channel, I always do a roundup every evening on the channel, rounding up all the latest United news into 10 minutes, starting with what's been said on the takeover from a very good source in Laurie Whitwell. So Laurie Whitwell works with The Athletic, and he's a very credible journalist when it comes to Manchester United news. He's probably one of the best informed Manchester United journalists, and he wrote a lot about the whole situation ongoing. And here's a few of the key points that he mentioned on the takeover and why the Glazers are, really looking at potentially selling the club, and why is there maybe potential conversations with the UAE. He gave context to some stuff, some of which that had been reported earlier. But he said the drag-along rights allowed the Glazers to force Ratcliffe to sell his stake if they sold the club. So he talks about the drag-along rights. Obviously, August 13th now means that if the Glazers want to sell the club, they can force Ratcliffe to sell his stake, and the Glazers are in control there. He confirms that story is true. He said until February 2027, any sale must be at $33 per share or higher at the price that Ratcliffe paid to ensure he recoups his investment. After that date, the Glazers could sell for less, removing the safeguard. He also confirms it's true. Up until February 2027, Man United has to be sold for over this price. After that time period, Man United can be sold for less than that price. So this is the best time to get a lot of money for United, because we physically can't sell for less than that price. And some believe that this is giving the Glazers incentive to sell before 2027 to create bidding competition and maximise value. So that is what Laurie Whitwell said, who's a very good journalist, to add context to this. He is confirming there's an incentive for the Glazers to sell before 2027. They can force Ratcliffe out, even though Ratcliffe's investing in the club, and this is why. And we've been talking about, are the Glazers going to sell the club? We don't know that for sure. But people are saying, well, why would the Glazers sell the club? They didn't want to sell it last time. That's why it went to Jim and not Qatar. Well, one of the reasons. They wanted to stay. Why would they want to sell? And the answer is they can sell, they can force Ratcliffe out, but why would they want to sell? Because this could be their best period to sell. Other sources believe they're just going to wait until the club value increases and hope that Ratcliffe gets us back on track. But they could sell. The Glazers have two options. They either sell in the next year and a half if they get a good offer from the Middle East, or they play the long game and hope that Ratcliffe gets us back on track to being Premier League winners. Because if we're Premier League winners and we're winning Premier Leagues multiple seasons in a row, our value is going to go up. Right now, the more realistic option is go to the Middle East in the next 2 years, or wait a while, hope that United become Premier League serial champions again, and then look to sell then when our value's up. Because right now, with the way we're playing, our value's going down. So, one of the reasons the Glazers are looking at potentially selling and are having apparently some kind of conversations with the UAE is because this is the best time to sell. Now, we know from other sources that the UAE has reached out to Manchester United legends about them coming on board. There has been some conversations surrounding the UAE and Manchester United. Some sources say it's advanced talks. Some sources say the UAE is considering making a bid. We don't know what the talks are about. We do not know how advanced the talks are, but what we do know is the Glazers' incentive to sell. I also want to talk about what was mentioned by Chris Wheeler and Nathan Salt. Again, they mentioned the drag-along rights, active since August 2013. They said the Glazers would seek over $5 billion to sell the club, which is a huge return on the $790 million purchase. And most expect the Glazers to wait for that valuation to be met as the club continues to grow, which is an interesting thing said by Chris Wheeler. What I think it is the Glazers are looking now to see if anyone out there in the Middle Eastern market is going to pay $5+ billion. If they're not, they keep the club until someone pays that price. I think it's a situation of the Glazers are looking and know it's a good time to sell. If someone wants to meet the price tag, I think the Glazers will sell. But we don't know if someone wants to meet that price tag. UAE, according to reports, are considering making the bid. They haven't made a bid. Turkey said that it's advanced, but we don't know how advanced that is. But right now, we're in a situation of, we want 5 billion plus. I think if someone's ready to pay that, the Glazers will sell. But we don't know if someone's ready to pay that, and the Glazers might wait 10 years. It might take 10 years for someone to be willing to pay that price and the Glazers to sell. But most expect the Glazers are waiting for the valuation to be met while the club continues to grow. Ratcliffe is investing in the club, upgrading Carrington, upgrading the stadium, which, to be fair, is going to improve the value of the club. And Ratcliffe is putting his money into the club to improve the facilities, the stadium, and try and make us better on the pitch, which is going to make us worth a lot more. For the Glazers to kick Ratcliffe out and potentially sell us. So the Glazers have won. The Glazers bringing in Ratcliffe's a huge win because they could stay at the club. Someone else could spend all their money. If it goes wrong, that other person gets all the blame. And if it goes right, they can sell the club for more money with this guy coming in and investing in the club without them having to invest. Everything that's done is needed to be done to make the club value go up, and they can sell the club for more money, which is crazy. Anyway, I want to continue on into other news and stories. So it has been mentioned about academy players potentially getting minutes. And this was really interestingly mentioned from the Mail. They said with Mbeumo and Amad set to depart for the Africa Cup of Nations at the end of the year, plus Amorim's desire to play Bruno deeper, opens up the prospect of Lacey and/or Fletcher being drafted into that position that would suddenly lack depth. Now, what's really interesting is it was reported last month that Lacey and Fletcher are two of the youngsters that have been called up to first team training and are seen as the most likely to break through. Jack Fletcher and Shea Lacey are seen as the two youngsters most likely to break through. There was a hope and expectation Seko Kone could break through, but the eye socket injuries kind of given him a setback. JJ Gabriel is not expected to break through for another year because he turned 15 last week. Like, he's 3 years younger than everyone else we're talking about almost. But Shea Lacey is the one that's been obviously training with England first team. He's incredibly highly rated. He's had injury issues. Jack Fletcher's been really, really good. And they're the two that have been training with the first team the most. And there's an expectation that, had we had Europa League football and Carabao Cup football, one of them could have got an opportunity. They may go out on loan. But they're the two most likely to break through. And with Mbeumo and Amad going to AFCON, there could be an opportunity there for them. You never know. You could see Camerson or Mantato get an opportunity as well. But they're the youngsters that are seen as most likely to break through. I want to continue on into a few other stories because as of now, Casemiro and Maguire are set to leave Man United at the end of the season, but they could stay if a new deal is negotiated for them. Rob Dawson mentioned that United have not ruled out keeping Casemiro beyond the end of the season, but he would likely have to accept a pay cut. As things stand, he will leave as a free agent in the summer. I think unless he's willing to take a big pay cut, I think Casemiro will leave. I think the wages he's on, 350k a week, he'd have to half that to stay. I'm happy for Casemiro to stay another year if he's on half the wages he's on now, because I do think he's a valuable player and he's just got a lack of legs. But right now he's starting nearly every game because he's a valuable player. But with the wages that Maguire and Casemiro are on, you can't justify keeping them on those wages. Both of them would have to pretty much half their wages to justify starting at United, justify staying at United, because next season, for me, they're bench players, not regular starters. So they should make the money that bench players should make. In terms of Maguire's contract, Romano's been speaking about it a bit, and he just said for Maguire's contract to be expended, both parties need to find a resolution on reduced terms. Maguire would need to reduce his current salary. Apparently, Maguire's willing to reduce his current salary, but he might be willing to reduce his current salary from 190k a week to 170k a week, whereas Man United will want him down to 120k a week because he's going to be the fourth, fifth choice centre-back, which kind of makes sense in regards to that. But I think, that would develop later on. But I think United obviously want to sort anything out before January, because if they move abroad, they can sign on in January if their contract's not that sorted with Man United. So I think Man United want to get that sorted sooner rather than later, but we'll have to keep an eye on that. And there's also talk of Semenyo having a release clause, according to Alex Crook, and Man United are interested in Semenyo. So that could be another one to watch, but I think transfer news in regards to Semenyo is a bit too early now, because I think until it gets to sort of May, there's probably not much going to happen with Semenyo. He's not going in January. He's a summer signing. Thank you for watching today's 10-minute roundup. Let me know your thoughts down below. Bye.